So I watched this video on YouTube that was talking about Hollywood. And what it was saying is that Hollywood has an agenda, and that movies are for psychological warfare, that whoever the people are who are behind Hollywood are trying to push an agenda, and that movies have subliminal messages. And so I watched a couple more videos about the subliminal messages in movies, some of the obvious ones in the Disney movies and things like that, and in Fight Club and things like that. But what I decided to start doing, because I like movies, I like watching movies, but I decided to start taking notes. When I would watch a movie and I would try to figure out, okay, what is this movie teaching me? What is the agenda behind this movie? What are the things that it's trying to tell us or make me think? And then what I did is that I decided to take the same skills that I learned for studying the Bible, in this case mostly inductive Bible study. I take those inductive skills and I decided to apply them to the list of the movies that I had made. I didn't make any movies, that I had watched. And so it's inductive study is things like who is in the text, what are the when statements, who, when, where, what are the where statements, what are you seeing as far as comparisons and contrasts, what are you seeing as far as cause and effect, what are you seeing as far as things that repeat, that usually tell you what the text is about. And I took and I applied those same skills to the movies that I watch. Now, I didn't do any like scientific study where I watched the 5 most widely watched movies of every year for the past 25 years. I didn't do that. Mostly I just watched the movies that I watch, that are popular movies or that are of interest to me. In any case, I figured it should be, even though it's not scientific, what you're getting is my observations. Now, this is based on 90 movies that I've watched, and these movies go anywhere from 1927 to 2020. And so I'm going to be talking about what these are all about. So here's what I found out. When the plot conflict is people versus people, as opposed to like The Perfect Storm where it's people versus nature. When the plot conflict is people versus people, it's almost always a conflict between the haves and the have-nots, between the powerful people and the underdogs. All right? But the powerful people are portrayed as selling themselves out, as enslaving themselves to power, as ruthless and scheming, as brutal and cruel, as proud and corrupt, lying, deceitful, creating mistrust, spreading propaganda, always nefarious means and abuse and cover-up. And in Hollywood, the powerful people, who are these powerful oppressors? In Hollywood, they are almost always the government. And by extension of the government, the military and the police, which means that for decades, since most of these movies are from 1977 till now, for decades, children and teenagers and young adults are being trained to think that the government is the enemy, and therefore the military and the police are the enemy. Now, with regard to our current events, when we see what's going on in Portland and Seattle, and in various riots and uprisings all over the country, it's almost no wonder, because they have been trained for decades by Hollywood to see the government and the military and the police as the problem. This is the enemy. They have sold themselves out. They have enslaved themselves to power. They are ruthless, scheming, brutal, cruel, proud, corrupt, deceitful, propagandist, abusive agency. Now, so those are the haves. Those are the powerful people. Now, who is it in the movies that are the heroes? Who is it in the movies that are the have-nots? They are portrayed as the ones who have strength and wisdom and morality and hope. They are heroes. They have integrity and courage and conscience, and they are true to themselves. Now think about this. In the movies, that is never the government. It is never the military. It is never the police. What it is, these heroes are always the ones who resist the corrupt government. These heroes, these people of integrity and courage, these people of morality and wisdom are always those who resist the government. The system is the enemy, and it is the person of integrity who resists the government. Wow. You know, to me, this is huge. And when you see now, what are these movies? I mean, first of all, it's like all of the Star Wars movies, right? It's the government, it's Senator Palpatine, it's the it's the governors themselves. When you look at movies like any of the Matrix movies, any of like the Batman Begins or The Dark Knight, V for Vendetta, Equilibrium, Gladiator, The Count of Monte Cristo, the Hunger Games movies, the Captain America, King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, movies like Code 8, Six Underground, even the Marvel movies. Who is the enemy? It's the government. Who is corrupt? It's the government. Is the government. Can you even think of a movie in the last, say, 30, 35 years? Can you even think of a movie where the government is the helpful, beneficial, heroic part of the movie? No, it's always those who resist the government. It's always these pawns, the underdogs, the rebellion, the resistance. It's always the resistance that are portrayed as those who are strong and people of integrity with morality and wisdom and conscience, who are true to oneself. The powerful oppressors are always the government and the military and the police and sometimes big business. Only rarely is it, sometimes it's industrialists, like movies like Contagion or Dark Waters or even Jurassic Park. Sometimes it's the criminals, but not very often. Sometimes it's the press, but not very often. And sometimes it's the church, but that's not very often at all, because in Hollywood, the church is a non-entity. The church doesn't matter. But all the resistance to the corrupt government, those are the heroes. Those are the ones who are shown by the movies to be the people who are really worth following. You know, according to the movies, when things go bad, you cannot count on the authorities, which is government, business leaders, the military, the police. When things go bad, you cannot count on them to fix things and help. You need common people with integrity, those who resist the government, those who rise up and rescue humanity from government. That's who the heroes are. That's who you count on when things are going bad. Now, and it is in this paradigm, I discovered, that almost everything is defined. If you want to talk about power, you know, one of the things of inductive study is you look at various themes that show up in the movies. If you want to talk about power, and what do movies say about power? The way to get power in most of the movies is by scheming and by conning people and by lying and theatricality and deception. Power belongs to those who own the press, who own the technology, who own the military, who use people to get what they want, who sow discord and destroy confidence, and it's almost always the government. On the opposite side, we can see that good has more power than evil, but good is always on the side of the resistance. That good is the people of integrity who stay true to who they are, the people with hope and courage. And so power is negative, but power can be used for good as long as you use it to resist the government. Does this sound at all familiar when you listen to the news or read it on the internet as to what the attitude of young America is? And you can see, of course, that's the attitude of young America because they've been trained. They've been trained for decades. The government is never the hero. The government is always the enemy. When you look at what the movies tell us about good and evil, that falls into the same categories. That the good people are the people who, I'm looking at my notes. I'm trying to find what I wrote about good and evil. There are good people everywhere, according to the movies, and there are bad people everywhere. But good has power over evil ultimately. But good people are those who resist the system. Good people are those that fight against the government because there's a relentless power of evil. And we must fight for what is good and what is right. And it's a gift. It's a gift to fight for the good of people. So the difference between good and evil, since there's goodness everywhere and there's evil everywhere, and in the movies there's evil even in the good people, and there is goodness even in the evil people. Good people are corruptible. Even the good guys can be monsters. So the difference between good and evil, according to Hollywood, is really what you're working towards. The good people are working towards good ends, which in the movies means resisting the system and fighting for the good of the oppressed, which means the people that the government is oppressing, right? So power fits into this paradigm. Good and evil fits into this paradigm. Even wisdom, when you look at what do the movies say wisdom is? Yeah, let me find that. What do the movies say wisdom is? Wisdom is essentially knowing the right thing to do and the right time to do it. It's using your brain and not emotions or superstition. Wisdom is also in the movies having some humility and not being proud like the I'm always right kind of a jerk. And so wisdom is even in the government, the military, and the police. You'll notice in the movies, they are never the paragons of wisdom. The paragons of wisdom are always the resistance. And what about fear? Yes, the government are the ones who used fear to manipulate people. Yeah, that's right. That's what the movies tell you. That I'm trying to find it. That fear is everywhere, and that the government uses fear to control people. Fear is what keeps people in line. It's the most effective means of control, and tyrannical power seeks to inspire fear, and that powerful people prey on the fearful. Now, it's interesting that in the movies, the government are always the ones that are doing that. But it's interesting in real life that we're seeing that on the streets as well. We're seeing that in PC and political correctness as well. We are seeing that in Antifa. We are seeing that in Black Lives Matter. We are seeing that in white supremacists. We are seeing that everywhere, that they try to use fear to prey on the fearful and to create conformity. And from what we've learned in Hollywood, it's the government and the military that are to be feared. It's the government and the military that create fear to control and subdue, and they prey on the fearful, which leads people to anger and to violence, justifying more control. But it's the wise and heroic people who resist, who use their integrity to resist, that what the movies tell us is that even moral people become monsters through fear, which justifies more governmental and military intervention and control. And the hope is the only thing stronger than fear. And hope in the movies is the hope of a successful and a justifying rebellion and victory against the government. And so you're supposed to free your mind from fear and join the resistance. That's what movies have been teaching us for decades. Anger, even freedom. Yeah, what is freedom about in the movies? People want to be free, right? When you're free, you no longer have any fear. But the price of freedom is high. But the movies also tell us that humanity can't be trusted with freedom, that humanity must be persuaded to surrender its freedom willingly. And of course, that's the government that is saying that you can't be trusted with freedom and that you have to surrender your freedom willingly, right? Even in Marvel's The Avengers, freedom is life's great lie. And it's the government that takes freedom away. And it's the rebels against the government that give freedom in the movies. The government doesn't believe in freedom in the movies. The government only believes in fear, power, and control. It's the resistance that believes in freedom. You see how everything conforms to this paradigm, to this model, that it is the government that is the problem. It is the system. It is military. It's the police. It's big business. And so that's what the movies are telling us. It's also interesting to look at how the movies describe people, how Hollywood describes people. What it says is that most people are sheep, that most people can't be trusted because they're corruptible, and they do get corrupted, but only fellow rebels can be trusted. That's what we learn in the movies. But we also learn about things like people and about things like faith and the way people think, is that not only are most people sheep, but people generally have their mind made up before any situation or decision arises that they believe fits their paradigm. What people do is they make up their minds first, and they believe what fits that paradigm, and they don't believe what doesn't fit that paradigm. And so what Hollywood says about people is that they decide more by intuition than by intellect. The most obvious example, thing like Star Wars. Luke, use your feelings. Use your feelings. Rejects things that don't conform to that, right? Rarely does evidence make a difference in the movies. What makes a difference in the movies is that your feelings, your intuitions. Don't use evidence. Don't use your intellect, right? And so when I see what's going on in America, when I see how young people think, young people less than 30 years old, I can see that they have been soundly trained by Hollywood for decades about the terribleness of the system. Now, back in the 60s, it was, never trust, right? Never trust authority. And that has come to fruition now, that the authority has become not only non-trustable, but the authority has become evil. And it must be overthrown, Hollywood says, because that's the only path to wisdom, it's the only path to freedom, and it's the only path to lack of fear. Hey, interact with me in the notes below this video. I'd love to discuss this with anybody who wants to talk about it.